Okay, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining. Busy morning, a lot going on. Never a dull moment in the Trump administration. As we know, we've become very accustomed to uh, a lot of uncertainty, constant change, and we are back at it this morning with new developments. So it's tough to keep pace with the fast changing news, but we do our best. Okay, let's jump right into it. We're a couple minutes late, so we will get going. So the topic of the day, two topics. One is what is Trump up to with Iran? And the other topic is should we be like Warren Buffett and move into cash? There's a lot of talk lately that the stock market is overvalued. Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett's company, recently reported earnings, and all the analysts and pundits were remarking how much cash Warren Buffett is sitting on. And the conclusion has been by many of the pundits that if Warren Buffett is sitting on so much cash, he must be ready for a big stock market crash. Otherwise, he wouldn't be sitting on so much cash. So these are the topics we're going to discuss. We will lead with Trump and Iran. So we know yesterday that last night, Trump paused this operation, which was enabling many of the international ships that have been stuck, not able to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. We began a process where we would open up shipping lanes and very gradually enable many of these ships that have been waiting to pass through the strait to pass through. So that operation had been going for a couple of days, and then Trump last evening announced he was going to pause it. And he was going to pause it at the request of Pakistan, who has been leading these negotiations between the US and Iran. And Trump said, okay, fine, I'm going to pause. We are going to give negotiations a real chance. And then this morning, there was a tweet out from Trump saying that negotiations are going very, very well. And he indicated that this is the closest that the United States has been to a deal with Iran. And he indicated that he was optimistic, but then he threatened that, you know what, you never know with the Iranians. And if they do not sign an agreement within the next 48 hours, the bombing will begin again, and it will be bombing like we've never seen before. Okay, so we're quite used to these types of threats from Trump. He's made many of them in recent weeks, but the ceasefire has held up, and it's very clear that these negotiations have reached a pretty serious stage. So let's try to understand what's going on with these negotiations. Well, based on some leaks, which seem to be pretty credible, this agreement, which is being called a memorandum of understanding, so it really is a preliminary agreement, which would buy time to allow more serious negotiations to get underway where the details would be hammered out. But based on this leaked memorandum of understanding, it looks as though the highlights are the following. Number one is as these negotiations proceed, as the nitty-gritty details of an agreement are hammered out, both the United States and Iran would lift their blockades, their respective blockades that they each hold over the Strait of Hormuz. So this would be a gradual lifting of these blockades. And as progress was made in these negotiations, the blockade would be eased more and more, lessened more and more. Okay, so that's the first point. And this is a big deal. And this is why this morning you see about a 6% decline in oil prices. The market is looking at, wow, the Strait of Hormuz may open up, oil tankers may begin to pass through, and therefore we've seen the price of oil decline pretty sharply this morning. The next point is that the United States would commit to lifting sanctions on Iran. Now, these sanctions have frozen billions of dollars in Iranian assets that Iran holds abroad in their international banking system. So, according to this agreement, there would be a gradual lifting of these sanctions, which would enable Iran to start to have access to these tens of billions of dollars in frozen assets. Now, obviously, the unfreezing wouldn't happen all at once. It would happen gradually, and I'm sure it would happen in response to Iran complying with parts of the agreement. So the lifting of sanctions, Iran's access to lots of money would be tied to their good behavior. Number three, apparently the agreement would halt Iran's ability to enrich uranium, which is the necessary ingredient to create a nuclear weapon. It would halt their ability to enrich uranium for somewhere between 12 and 15 years. Now, why 12 to 15 years? You have to ask yourself, isn't this precisely what Trump criticized Obama for doing, right? The famous JCPOA, Obama's nuclear agreement with Iran. It actually froze or prevented Iran from enriching uranium for about 15 years, and Trump heavily criticized it. Well, clearly, the Trump administration is thinking that after 12 to 15-year period, this Iranian regime would have collapsed. I think that's the implicit hope in this type of agreement. Then the next important point is that Iran would agree to transfer their highly enriched uranium, which they currently possess. It's buried under a lot of rubble, so it's difficult to get to, but it's there. They would transfer that enriched uranium out of the country to a third party. Now, just a little while ago, Trump released a statement, I believe it was to CBS, saying that no, it's not just transferring that enriched uranium to some other country, which could be Russia, it could be China, who knows. Trump is saying that it would need to be transferred to the United States. Okay, so that he said, unless it's transferred to the United States, no agreement. That's according to Trump's own words just a short while ago. And then the final point is that Trump is saying they must agree within 48 hours, right? I said that earlier. They must agree within 48 hours. If after 48 hours this is not agreed upon and signed, then the United States and Israel would begin bombing again. So let me share with you my thoughts on this agreement. Number one, I think this clause of a 12 to 15-year time period is a major mistake. There is no reason whatsoever that the United States needs to make a concession to Iran that they should have the ability to enrich uranium at some point in the future, whether it's 12 years, whether it's 15 years, whether it's 30 years. There is zero reason why Iran should ever have the ability to enrich uranium to create a nuclear weapon. There's just no need for that. So I think that's mistake number one. And once you give them that opening where they can enrich uranium for 12 years or 15 years, they're going to start doing it earlier, right? This gives them a key opening to begin cheating on the agreement pretty quickly. And really all they need to do is wait out the Trump administration for another couple of years and then they can start enriching under a new president who is not going to have the appetite to go on a bombing campaign against Iran. So I think that's the first mistake. The second mistake, we do not see any language on Iran uh, blocking Iran from funding their proxy networks, right? And this was a big mistake under the Obama agreement, right? Iran had access to all this cash, right? All the sanctions were removed, and they had a huge pile of cash. And with that cash, they funded Hezbollah, the Houthis, um, Hamas. So without any language on the proxies, making it impossible for them to fund the proxies, they're going to fund proxies. And this is a big mistake, and we would be terribly dangerous. The other thing is you want the something about ballistic missiles in here. There is no limitation in this language on Iran's ability to uh, to return to building up its ballistic missile stockpile, right? And they will get back at it immediately. We saw just after the 12-day war back in June of last year, Iran manufactured a huge stockpile of ballistic missiles. And as we came into this war, they had already really replenished their stockpile of ballistic missiles and actually had more ballistic missiles than ever before. So that's just going to happen again, right? If there's nothing in this agreement on that issue, we're going to just recreate the problem. Trump is solely focused on the enriched uranium, and it seems to be his priority is just extracting that enriched uranium, but he's giving them a lot of leeway on all these other areas, which are quite dangerous. So it looks to me like if the leak is accurate, this does not look like a good deal. And the question is, you know, Trump never gives up leverage. I mean, this is something that we've learned about Trump. Once he really truly has leverage, he goes for the jugular. So why would Trump start now with Iran when Iran is really on the ropes? Why is he looking to go easy on them, surrender leverage? What is going on here? Now, let me add to this, this puzzle. Why is Trump easing up on Iran at this very moment? The intelligence community in Israel believes that if the current blockade is maintained for the next couple months, the Iranian regime probably would not survive in 2026. Now, why is that? Why do they come to this conclusion? And of course, I don't have access to all their analysis, and they know obviously a lot more than I do about the fragility of the Iranian regime. But we can make some educated guesses to why they're coming to this conclusion that the regime wouldn't survive. Number one, the currency, the rial, is an absolute free fall. Right now, the exchange rate, it takes 1.8 million rial to buy $1. Okay. And that is 30% weaker from where it was when the Iranian protests began in January. So we already had a currency that was crashing, and it's fallen an additional 30% between January and today. So this is a currency that is collapsing. And while this is happening, inflation is skyrocketing. Inflation reportedly was at about 40% back in January. Now I'm seeing estimates that it's up to about 200%. I suspect it's actually a lot higher than that because a lot of these official estimates, and these are official estimates from the government, governments usually in these types of situations are dishonest. They lie about the actual data. So I suspect it could be, not 200%, but maybe 400%. So they have a serious inflation problem. So this is an economy that is in deep trouble. Their oil, number three, their oil exports have basically come to a halt because of the naval blockade. And revenues from oil exports are the lifeline of this regime. Once you halt their oil exports, they have no access to cash, right? You've actually choked off the lifeline of this government. And once you choke off that lifeline, right, the regime has no ability to pay its workers or to pay the members of its repressive apparatus, the IRGC and the Basij. If you can't pay them, and many of these guys are loyal to the regime because this is a source of their income, uh, then you lose your repressive apparatus after some point. You lose your government workers after some point. The estimate right now, the best estimate I've seen is that the regime from the shutdown of the oil industry, and they're losing about $500 million a day, or about $13 billion a month. So if you extrapolate that for a 12-month period, that's actually the revenue loss is close to the size of the entire Iranian economy. So this is leading to total economic collapse. But it needs to be maintained. If it's not maintained, and if you let them off the hook, then you allow the regime to live again, right? And right now, we are probably in the early stages of a death spiral of this regime, right? When you can't pay your loyalists, well, a big again a big reason why your loyalists are loyal to you is because you're paying them, and once you can't pay them anymore, their loyalty wears thin after some time. So this really is the again these are the Israeli security establishment, their intelligence establishment believes if this blockade were just maintained a few more months, this regime would be in its death spiral. I gave you some general ideas of why that might be the case. But it leads you to wonder, who in this regime is the Trump administration negotiating with, right? Because all along we've heard that, this regime is made up of ideologues. They have no intention whatsoever of surrendering their nuclear ambitions. Um, and but are there pragmatists, right? Are there pragmatists? We've heard there's some pragmatists. Well, the one pragmatist we've heard about is the president of the country. His name is Pezeshkian. And he might, when we talk about a pragmatist, this is someone who probably is of the view that let's pretend that we're going to give the Trump administration something of what he wants so we can make a deal. And if we can make a deal, then we can get our economy running again. And then we can worry about cheating on the deal later on. That's what an Iranian pragmatist looks like. It's not someone who wants to really get along with the United States and distance themselves from their ideology of taking over the Middle East, destroying Israel, eventually taking over the world. No, he also has that goal. But he's pragmatic to the extent that he says, look, let's buy ourselves some time. And eventually we'll cheat. We can play make believe with the Trump administration for a few years, but once Trump is gone, we start to cheat on the deal and we get back to our usual behavior, and we just need to outlast this administration. The hardliners, and the main hardliner here is the new head of the IRGC. His name is Ahmed Vahidi. We've spoken about him before. And his view, in all likelihood, is look, signing a deal is basically making a concession in front of the world. And there's no way that this regime is going to make a concession in front of the world. We will be seen as being defeated. And aside from that, I do not mind at all bombs being dropped on Iran. In fact, I welcome it. I welcome it because I have this vision, this ideological vision that destruction brings our messianic future now, right? If the closer we come to destruction means the closer we come to the Messiah coming, and the sooner the Messiah comes, the sooner we get to transforming the Middle East and the world, transforming it into our image, and it will be Shia Islam forever. So that's the view of Vahidi, right? And these are things that I'm not just making up. This is based on hours and hours of studying and listening to people who understand this regime inside and out. This is the messianic vision that Vahidi and those around him have. So you have these two approaches. None of them are actually moderate, right? The Pezeshkian, the president, has a more pragmatic view in that he feels that they need to buy some time. Vahidi, on the other hand, has a view that we don't need to buy any time. Let's just bring destruction now. The faster we bring destruction, the faster we bring the Muslim Messiah, and the world will be transformed. Now, if we see that Iran signs a deal, we know that the president, for whatever reason, won the debate inside of Iran. He was able to be persuasive, and he got Vahidi to acquiesce. That's what happens if a deal is signed. It's not, never think that Iran actually is going to concede and give real concessions. That's not what this is about. This is not what they did under Obama. It's not what they did under Biden, and it will not be what they do under Trump. It will just be that those who want to buy time won the argument for the moment. So, what is Trump up to? Doesn't Trump understand what we're discussing here? Well, I think there are four possibilities of what Trump might be thinking. The first possibility, Trump may believe that he has accomplished a great deal in this war. And it's true. He has achieved a tremendous amount. Perhaps from a purely military standpoint, he's achieved more than any U.S. Military has since World War II, right? We completely wiped out the old leadership of Iran, right? We completely wiped out their Air Force. These are things we've heard again and again, and it's all true. Their Navy is gone, right? Yes, they have these small speedboats which can continue to wreak some havoc, but we could take those out in a matter of weeks as well. But for the most part, the Navy is sitting at the bottom of the sea. Their missile defense system is gone. They have far fewer ballistic missiles than they once did. And as of today, their ability to manufacture new missiles has been completely destroyed. They would have to rebuild their manufacturing infrastructure from scratch. So Trump may be thinking, look, let's get an agreement and take the win and get out of here. And we will sign an agreement and I can declare victory. And it is a victory of sorts, right? It is a victory. And he will tell the world that this was a victory and he stood up to Iran like no other U.S. president ever did before. And he'll be right. But Iran has patience. They have more patience than we do. And the regime has a darn good chance of outliving Trump, right? Trump's term will be over in a few years. And as long as the regime is still standing, they will cheat on this agreement and they will get away with it under a future president. Okay. That's been the trend. They understand their history very well, and that will be the trend in the future. But Trump may be willing to, quote unquote, take the win. Second possibility, Trump may simply be buying time to allow the Israeli and American militaries to plan the next wave of attacks. right? Continue to, fine tune their weapon systems. That's a possibility. It's a possibility. A third possibility is Trump has a meeting coming up with the leader of China, Xi Jinping, that is scheduled to take place in Beijing on May 14th and May 15th. And if Trump can extend this ceasefire and keep negotiating until May 14th, that meeting will definitely take place. And maybe Trump has some very high hopes for those meetings, right? We don't know what he has planned. We don't know what he's going to ask Xi Jinping. He probably has some big asks, and he probably wants to come home with some, what he would call big wins. And Trump is always very good at claiming big wins. But if war breaks out before that, that meeting will be canceled. There's just no doubt about it. It'll be postponed. There was a meeting that was supposed to take place between the two leaders a few weeks ago, but because of the war, that meeting was postponed until May. And Trump really wants to get that meeting done. So he may be just buying time, get that meeting done with, declare his victory, and then get back to war, right? That's also possible. And a fourth possibility is Trump may be trying to create greater fractures within the Iranian regime. We know there are, or we think there are fractures. We really don't know for certain anything, but the intelligence that's leaking out tells us, right, that there are these fractures between the pragmatists and the hardliners, and among various other groups that are no longer getting paid like they were because the economic stranglehold is tightening, the noose is tightening, and it's harder and harder for the Iranian regime to pay its workers and its repressive apparatus. So there may be fractures, multiple fractures developing. And if Trump signals to Iran that we want to make peace and we can be good peace partners, he might feel like he could create even greater fractures between the ideologues and the pragmatists and some other groups in Iran. So maybe that's his angle. My personal belief is that unfortunately, I do think Trump thinks he can strike deals with just about anybody, right? He thought he could strike a deal with the leader of North Korea in his first administration, and he flew to North Korea and he tried to make a deal there. He thinks he can make deals with Putin. Trump, I think, in some ways has this naive Western attitude, and he really does not understand radical Islam. And he thinks simply because they are up against the wall, they've been defeated militarily, and their economy is going through absolute chaos. He thinks maybe he can get them to bend and make serious concessions that will last. And that's my concern. That's my fear. And that's where I think his head at is right now. I don't have any tangible evidence to present to you why I think that's the most likely scenario, other than Trump's own personal history, where he's really tried to make deals with some very, very bad actors in the past. And it was proven that he wasn't able to. I think, to this day, he believes he can strike a real deal with Putin. No matter how many times Putin, shows Trump, I'm not interested in making a deal. I want Ukraine. I want all of Ukraine. Trump continues to think a deal is to be had there, and there just isn't. So anyway, that's my take. Now, if Trump signs a deal, it's a big mistake. And I think Trump perhaps doesn't really appreciate, he doesn't truly appreciate how much leverage he has over Iran. As I mentioned, the Israeli intelligence estimates that the Iranian economy is under collapse, the regime is under collapse, and if we can just maintain this blockade for a few more months, the regime will collapse sometime later this year. Um, but once that blockade is begins to be eased and those sanctions are start to be lifted, the leverage disappears and Iran begins to rebuild very, very quickly. They're very, very good at rebuilding fast. Okay, we know that. We know that from, very recent history. Between June of last year and just before this war, just before February 28th, they already had more ballistic missiles than they ever had in their entire history. That shows you how quickly these guys can rebuild. But perhaps Trump feels like he can't maintain the blockade for too much longer. Maybe that's Trump's worry, right? He to have a good part of our navy sitting in the Persian Gulf. Maybe Trump feels like the clock is ticking, and maybe he feels more pressure than he lets on. That's possible, but or maybe Trump is worried about oil, right? That we hear again and again how high oil prices are, and it's squeezing the American economy. So maybe that's Trump's concern. Well, if it comes to oil, if it comes to oil, uh, I don't think he should be very concerned because the oil market will stabilize. It will stabilize, and we're already starting to see real clear signs that the oil market is stabilizing because we're seeing more supply come onto the market. And that supply is coming from various sources. Number one, right? May 1st, the United Arab Emirates, which is a member of OPEC, broke from OPEC. And now the United Arab Emirates can pump oil at its full capacity. The UAE, their full capacity is somewhere around 4.3 million barrels a day. But they've been producing by about 3 million barrels per day because that's their quota with OPEC, right? OPEC gives every country a quota, and they're not allowed to produce beyond that quota, right? Because out of fear that that could push oil prices down. And the oil producing countries want to keep oil prices high because that brings them more revenues. Well, now that the UAE left OPEC, they can increase their production pretty quickly from 3 million barrels a day to around 4 million barrels per day. And after that, they could get to 4.5 million barrels per day pretty quickly. And their ultimate goal is to produce 5.5 million barrels per day. So that's a lot more oil that is going to be coming onto the market, and that'll help bring oil prices down. The other thing to know is Venezuela, right? Exxon, a short while ago, said they had no interest in going into Venezuela and pumping oil, right? They said, we're not going to do it until we know who the next government is going to be, until there's a democracy, until there's clear rules of the game. But Exxon recently announced that they're going to look for oil in Venezuela. They're willing to sign business deals. And once Exxon goes in, you can bet that a lot of other, Chevron's already there. Once Exxon goes in, you can bet that a lot of the other big oil companies will go into Venezuela. And it won't be too long before we see a big ramp up in oil production out of Venezuela. Additionally, we now know that a bunch of oil producing Arab countries are making rapid advancements towards producing pipelines so they can get around the Strait of Hormuz. And one of these main pipelines will go through Israel. And that way you completely avoid the Strait of Hormuz, and you can pump oil out to Europe through Israel. So Israel's talking to the United Arab Emirates about this. I suspect soon enough they'll be talking to the Saudis about this. So you're getting a big supply response. You're also getting a big supply response from U.S. oil producers. We're seeing U.S. oil producers also ramp up their oil production. So I suspect that before not too long, you're going to have a lot more oil supply into the market. That's going to be putting downward pressure on oil prices. So Trump doesn't need to be as worried about the price of oil as so many pundits seem to think. In addition to that, we've talked about this a lot. The price of oil may seem high, but truthfully, if you look at historical periods in times of crisis, oil prices are actually not high at all. And if you look at oil compared to the cost of other goods and services in our economy, oil prices at a little over $100 a barrel are actually pretty much in line with other prices. It's just that gasoline and oil lagged inflation by so much over the last 30 years or so. Now we've sort of played catch up, but these oil prices by no means are very damaging to our economy. So I think the oil story, this idea that we're in some terrible oil crisis, and if the war goes on another couple of months, that we're going to have, an economic crisis because of oil. I think this is wishful thinking by opponents of the war, and those who are just in favor of the war but terrified of the oil market. I think they do not understand the oil market. And it's just not the source of economic stress that so many believe it to be. So where does this leave us? My educated guess is that, and I hope I'm not proven wrong here. My educated guess is that at the end of the day, Ahmed Vahidi is not going to relent. And he is not going to give Trump his bare minimum. Trump's bare minimum here for an agreement is to transfer the enriched uranium out of Iran. If Trump doesn't get that, Trump doesn't sign. And in my mind, if Ahmed Vahidi relinquishes that enriched uranium, to him, in his mind, that signals defeat to the United States in front of the entire world. And he won't do that. So I think Iran won't agree. But Trump doesn't want war, at least not yet. So I think Trump does more bluster, and we continue with this period of essentially a stalemate until after Trump gets back from China, right? And Trump gets back from China, let's say May 17th or so, and then it's decision time. And then it's decision time. And I suspect Trump will greenlight a war that maybe lasts another week to 2 weeks. By that time, the military experts have said we still have about 25% of our targets that we haven't hit that we would like to hit. So that will take about 2 weeks, and Trump can then really inflict massive amount of damage. I think in that round of fighting, we will take out, when I say we, I mean Israel, because they're really the experts at taking out leadership. They'll take out Ahmed Vahidi and whoever else they think are the real hardliners. And that will bring the regime even closer to collapse. And maybe at that stage, there might be someone to talk to. Or we'll be at the stage where the people feel more comfortable taking to the streets. Anyway, I hope that's the scenario. I hope we do not see an agreement, because if we do see an agreement, while the markets will love it, it will be a bad agreement, and an agreement that the Iranians will ultimately cheat on. And I do not know that any future president would have the stomach to block them from getting a nuclear weapon and becoming a major danger to the world. So I gave you my base case scenario. and what the risk case scenario is. And now with that, let's move on to the stock market. And should we be like Warren Buffett and start selling some of our investments
Excuse me,
and
Seth.
raise cash?
Excuse me, Seth.
Yes.
Before we move off the political side of things, can you comment on like the reports on Netanyahu saying that we will continue to bomb Iran regardless of whether there's a treaty or anything else that happens with the U.S.? Like, are they on an independent track?
No, they're not. And he has not said that in like the last 24 hours. So those are comments he's made in the past. But if there is an agreement to have a protracted ceasefire, notice that Israel hasn't broken the ceasefire, a protracted ceasefire or a truce of some sort, Israel will not break that truce. There's like zero chance Israel would go off on its own and and do something that Trump is not behind.
Okay, thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Thanks. No, important question. Okay, let's move to the stock market. Now, Berkshire Hathaway over the weekend came out and reported that they are holding 397 billion in cash. And Buffett, in a series of interviews, said that they don't see any opportunity, any big opportunities, right? Yeah, they're nibbling here and there, but no big opportunities that can really move the needle for Berkshire Hathaway. And based on these comments that Buffett made, you had social media, not only social media, but even in the official media, comments that concluded that if Buffett is sitting on such a large stockpile of cash, that means that this market must be incredibly expensive, probably in bubble territory, and therefore uninvestable. Now, let me say that this is a misreading of the situation, and it's a misunderstanding of Berkshire Hathaway. So let's get into a little bit Berkshire Hathaway's philosophy and why they're sitting on so much cash. Well, first, it's important to know that Berkshire Hathaway and Warren Buffett, they only invest in companies that are strictly within their circle or their area of competence. They only invest in very mature, large cap businesses. The only tech company that they invest in is Apple. Outside of Apple, they own no tech. Okay. They own no tech. So again, their universe of potential investments are large, mature companies. Now, let's look at their big holdings outside of Apple, their large, mature holdings. Well, they have Coca-Cola. That's a huge holding for Berkshire. Coca-Cola trades at a PE ratio of 25. Okay, that's a pretty high PE ratio. Another large holding that they have is Walmart. Walmart has a PE ratio of 48. Okay, that is extremely high. Another large holding they have is Costco. Costco's PE ratio is 52. They hold Moody's. Moody's has a PE ratio of 33. So when Warren Buffett talks about his universe, we have to think about his universe. And if he's not seeing opportunities, we can see why. All the stocks that he loves are priced very, very high. If I were in his shoes, I wouldn't buy Coca-Cola either. I wouldn't buy Walmart. I wouldn't buy Costco. I wouldn't buy Moody's. None of them. He's not wrong. In his pond is absolutely overfished. Okay. too many fishermen, too many buyers, too many owners of the companies that Berkshire Hathaway owns. He's right. There are really no great opportunities. I'd be sitting on a lot of cash too if I were him. The other important point is that Berkshire Hathaway is fundamentally an insurance company, right? They own 100% stakes in a bunch of insurance companies, right? If you look at all their holdings, Berkshire is mostly an insurance company. And as an insurance company, you have to have massive cash buffers to pay out insurance claims when there are hurricanes or wars or any major events, right? You just have to sit on a lot of cash. So a meaningful chunk of Berkshire Hathaway's $397 billion in cash, it's structural, right? It's not tactical. It's not because he thinks there's this major calamity coming. He needs to sit on a lot of cash in case he has to pay out insurance claims. So 397 billion in cash. What percent of total assets does that represent, right? Berkshire Hathaway has total assets of a little over a trillion. So his cash buffer right now is about 37%. That 397 billion represents about 37% of their assets. That sounds like a heck of a lot. But normally, in normal times, Berkshire Hathaway holds about between 25 to 30% of his assets in cash, okay, or cash equivalents. So right now, they're holding about 7 to 12% more in cash than they usually do. Now, that doesn't sound like all that big of a deal, right? 7 to 12% more than usual. And I think we understand now why they have 7 to 12% more, because in the things that they like to buy, those things, those stocks are super expensive right now. And he doesn't ever touch, you know, technology, AI, the things that are doing really well, that are leading this market. He doesn't consider that his field of expertise. And Warren Buffett doesn't is has never brought on new talent to analyze new technology. It's just not his way. He doesn't do it. He's been a successful investor for many, many, many decades doing it his way. So he's continuing to do it his way. Now, I want to make an additional point that during the 2020 COVID crash, okay, the market dropped by about 33% at that point. Did Buffett see that as an opportunity? No, he didn't. Buffett did not deploy any meaningful amounts of cash. Okay. During 2022, the market dropped by about 20%. Did Buffett deploy any meaningful amount of cash in that move? No, he didn't. Last year, in April of last year, the market dropped, and between February and April, the market dropped by about 20% from top to bottom. Did he deploy any meaningful amount of cash during that 20% drop? No, he didn't. Why? Because his companies, the type of things that he likes to invest in, they didn't drop that much. It didn't move the needle. They dropped a few. Buffett is looking for huge opportunities in things that he understands very, very well. So a 20% move, a 30% move is not going to get him to deploy cash, right? It's just what we consider a major market move is not what Buffett is looking for. So his analysis has nothing to do with the market being overvalued by 30%. That's not how he's thinking about it. Okay. That's not the metric that would get him to put money to work into the market. Now, I want to say that Berkshire Hathaway, which we used to hold, by the way, we used to own it, it has underperformed the S&P 500 over the last 5 years by about 10 percentage points. And it's underperformed the stock market since early 2025 by about 20 percentage points. So the fact that Berkshire does not touch technology, it's incredibly, incredibly damaging to their performance. So I have tremendous respect for Warren Buffett, right? He is one of the greatest investors of all time, maybe the greatest investor of all time. I've spent a lot of time studying the way he invests. I've learned a tremendous amount from him, but I consider my circle of competence to be investing in technology. Not because I'm going into the nitty gritty detail of the balance sheets and the financial statements of the tech companies, not because I understand that I'm on the cutting edge of um, of what is going to drive AI in going forward. No, but I do understand the incredible transformative powers that AI is having on this economy, uh, and uh, and I understand that the valuations of these tech companies are just not that expensive relative to the earnings that they're producing. So I genuinely see high quality companies that are not expensive. And we're playing this through ETFs. I'm not playing it through buying Microsoft or NVIDIA necessarily, but buying ETFs that have exposure to these incredible tech companies. So Warren Buffett is right when he's looking at his expertise, right? His pond. He's absolutely right. There are not great opportunities in his investment universe. But if we look outside of his investment universe, there are great opportunities. And that's why the market continues to power higher and higher. Now, you hear again and again people sort of extrapolating. Oh, Buffett is sitting on so much cash. We just demonstrated he's actually not sitting on all that much cash for Berkshire. But people have sort of extrapolated and said, you know what, because he's sitting on so much cash, therefore it means the stock market is incredibly expensive. It's never been so expensive. But look, right now where we're sitting today, the stock market is trading at a PE of 21 and a half. Okay. Buffett's holdings are looking at 25, 30, 40 PEs. 21 and a half is not so high. In fact, if you go to January of this year, the PE on the S&P 500 was 23. So it was higher. If you were to go back to January of 2025, the PE was at 22. If you were to go back to January of 2024, the PE was 22. So we're at 21 and a half. We're not very, we certainly are no higher than where we've been. And the earnings surprises, we wrote about this a few days ago in our global macro update. The earnings surprises from S&P 500 companies continue to beat expectations by not a mile, but by 10 miles. So you're going to see analysts continue to revise up their earnings estimates for 2026 and 2027 and 2028. And that's going to keep that PE ratio at from not going to such exaggerated levels. So from a market standpoint, we look to be reasonably priced. There was a lot of misunderstanding about what Warren Buffett was actually explaining, and the market looks pretty healthy. And even if we go back to bombing, yes, we will get pullbacks, but as we've seen, those pullbacks just represent very, very good buying opportunities. And if we do sign an agreement, it will be up, up, and away without any pullbacks in the near term anyway. So let's stop there and see if we have any questions or comments from anybody.